Good morning to everybody, or a good day to everybody, and a special hello to everyone and to Vladimir Yefimov, if I'm saying that well enough. And I was a student. I lived in Alaska, and I was into Russian history, especially when the Russian period in Alaska and coming down the West Coast. And during the 60s, I was in anti-Vietnam War, and so I was very interested in war and peace. And I read about Russia's history and its intellectual tradition, and I look at Vladimir as representing that wonderful tradition. And with no further ado, and I would like to have people hear Vladimir from his own voice. So, Vladimir, please give us maybe a little more introduction. People have asked, boy, having 3 PhDs, that's pretty impressive. They'd like to hear a little bit about growing up and maybe teaching in Moscow. There were some thoughts, and then not and then okay, and then we'll get to Ukraine and your thoughts on how you became interested in Ukraine. So that would be an introduction people I think have been asked and would like to hear from you.
Okay, I will try. Well, I was born in 1946 in Moscow. I am Moscowite of the third generation. And why I decided to study economics and even more mathematical economics in Moscow State University. You know, at that time, it was 64. The Russian government, at that time, it was Khrushchev, announced that the present day generation will live under communism. So we will construct communism in 20 years. And so what is also very much discussed at that time in the Soviet Union, that the role of mathematics in economic development. So I decided to study economics and application of mathematical method in economics in some way to approach this time of communism, of a glorious, beautiful future of human beings. And it's interesting to remember that I tried to convince my neighbor in the school to join me. I said, if we will apply mathematics in our Soviet economy, the communists will arrive not in 20 years, but in 10 years. And so she joined me. So 5 years as a graduate student in the Department of Economics. And after that, I began postgraduate studies because half of my future PhD dissertation was already practically ready. I prepared it during 4th and 5th years of my graduate studies. So in 71, I defended my first PhD dissertation and became assistant professor in the Department of Application of Mathematical Methods in Economics. And I worked at that place during 18 years. to be honest with you, quite often, quite quickly, I understand that the role of mathematics is much more modest than I suspected before. And even more, mathematical methods, what was usually and traditionally applied, they're not, it's impossible to apply them fruitfully, and it's necessary to propose something else. And so quite quickly, I began to develop and practice what is called gaming simulation. I collaborated with this topic with Americans, a delegation of American scholars who were involved in this area, gaming simulation, came to Moscow. So, and an article even was published in an American journal, Simulation and Games. So, what was necessary to do? It was necessary to change really, as it was called at that time, economic mechanism, economic system. Because even at that time in 70s, a lot of people would realize that the system is not very efficient economically and socially. So gaming simulation, I supposed, could improve, could serve as a basis of laboratory experiments. And so I was from the very beginning practically partisan of experimental methods, not just theories. And so to make natural experiments, it's quite difficult in the social sphere. But gaming simulation could serve as a technical basis for laboratory experiments. And so I began to prepare large-scale simulation game with the objective to model the functioning of the Soviet economy with two different scenarios. One scenario was just existing at that time economic system with centralized planning and so on. And another one, an alternative. And as an alternative, I used Hungarian system. And this system was much more advanced in the direction of market economy. I worked on this simulation model for 5 years, and 2 years just to prepare software for the computer. And when it was ready, and it was 85, 86, I suppose I was even sure that now everybody will come to me to make these laboratory experiments. But to my surprise, nobody came. And when I insisted, when I proposed, they was not very ready and to make this kind of work, including future minister of the Russian economy, Yasin. He worked at that time in the Institute of Mathematical Economics in Moscow, and I collaborated with him very closely. And my next dissertation was defended in 89, and he was one of the most important members of the commission. So he was optimistic, and he pushed me, he insisted that I defend the dissertation as soon as possible, but practically he refused to participate in the organization of the experiments. So finally, I made some I was not happy at all, some conventional experiments. I defended my dissertation, but it was not what I wanted. And I thought, why it's so? Why? Maybe because it's too complicated. And I decided to make another model, not national wide as it was that I already created. It's necessary to take something smaller. And I decided it's necessary to take a rural district, not even oblast, not even province, but just part of the province, district. And it was a district between two capitals, between Moscow and Yaroslavl. And in this district, a very important problem of the absence of manpower existed, because all people who wanted to improve their situation migrated either to Moscow or to Yaroslavl. And the local authorities were very much interested to attract manpower in the district. So I began to work to create this model, but very soon I understand, because of the condition existing in this district, that it's possible to organize not just laboratory experiments, but natural experiments. And because of this problem of manpower, local authorities agreed to make possible organization of these experiments. And the topic was transformation of collective farms, collective and state farms, into a set of family farms. But local people was not enthusiastic at all to become private farmers. And I collaborated with Moscow mass media, with newspaper Izvestia, who promoted also this kind, because it was already perestroika, launched by Gorbachev. And so I published several articles with invitation to come to this district. And I was obliged to help to create private farms. And it was a success. I have received more than 500 letters from the people who wanted to come and to become private farmers. They described their problems that they had. It's a very interesting human documents. And so I decided, studying these documents, studying these letters, I decided to invite just seven persons, but it's not persons, several families. 7 families, just to begin with. And they came from all over the Soviet Union. A family came from Armenia, a family came from Belarus, and it's interesting to note that next year, when they were established, one of them the guy from Belarus, had the highest uh, harvest, highest records
Yield,
in huh? Fields, yeah,
yield. Yeah,
yield, yes,
yeah.
highest yields. Uh, but it's interesting to note also that local authorities, as I told you, were very interested to attract manpower. But quite quickly they realized that these private farmers did not listen their orders, and they were not happy with it. That's why this kind of experiments practically stopped. And so, because I was so profoundly involved in agricultural problems, and I worked in the department which has nothing in common with agriculture. So I changed my employment. I moved to the Academy of National Economy of the USSR under the Council of Ministers, and I became I became professor of the agribusiness chair, where I worked 2 years before moving to France. Now, Ukraine. You see, I collaborated with Ukrainians. It's just enough to say that my first scientific article, which was practically totally mathematical, I prepared this article when I was student of the 4th or 5th years of, and it was published in Kiev. After that, when I began to work with simulation games, also a person from Kiev collaborated with me very closely. So I knew Ukraine, what it is. And it was just part of my country, of my motherland. All of us felt one nation. It was the same with Armenians, with the same with Georgians. I never noticed any contradictions between us. And when I moved to France, I began to be interested and involved in institutional studies. What I did really in Moscow, in Russia, in the Soviet Union, with these laboratory experiments, is practically, it was institutional approach. I tried to change rules. I tried to change beliefs, and it was institutional economics. And my dissertation, which I defended in Geneva, in Switzerland, in 2002, 2002, it was the dissertation on institutional economics, but applied to agricultural area. All my experiments in Soviet Union in this area, I complemented with experience as a consultant of the European Union. I worked in Belarus and worked in several provinces of Russia, in Kazakhstan. So all these experiments I worked with, and it was the result of these experiences plus my advancement in the institutional theory. Just was it was my dissertation. So when the conflict between Russia and Ukraine in 2014 began, I was interested professionally as a researcher, as a scholar. And I collected information. I read articles and books on this. And so I acted in this direction for several years. So what happened at the beginning of 2022, it was a continuation. So it was not something absolutely new. And in addition, I think it was something 2018, I had a visit in Ukraine, in several provinces, to study the situation in agriculture. And so also it was additional information for me. So just from the very beginning of this war, to be honest with you, it was my most important occupation. It was my topic of research. Practically, and my wife, who is present here, can prove it, witnessed about it. So I worked very hard all these 3 years. And what I registered in this video, it was the result of this work. I continue to work. This Friday, I will go to Geneva and to make a new talk in French, and some kind of advanced version of my analysis. Maybe it's enough. I was so long. It's enough.
You know what?
To talk.
Vladimir, that was wonderful. 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it'll be the introduction that and our larger thinking about how we all get along on this planet. And your story will be a part of that, and that will be important. So we could go back into Ukraine, but maybe that's enough of a start right there. And people may want to ask more about your visits to Ukraine. The other thing too, I'd like to mention right at the beginning, and then I'll just turn it over to everybody else, and we can go on from there. And there's no rush, even after an hour, if people want to stay on. What I noticed that you've read the book and you've participated for the last year or so, 2 years maybe, with the AMI and monetary reform. What brought you to monetary reform? And did Zarlenga, did you have any connection with him? Or I'm just curious how you became so interested in money.
Do you see?
Yes, we do.
And plus, we we can see that.
Very, very nice.
So as you see, it was 2011. So after my dissertation, I continue my research, and quite quickly I came to the conclusion that money plays a very important, let's say, central role in the functioning of economies. I began to dig this area. I was in contact with Stefan Zerlenger, and so he sent me this book, and I read a lot of other books on this, and I wrote several articles in Russian, French, and English, and unpublished. After the publication of my dissertation, I published 3 books, 2 in Russian and 1 after, in French quite recently. So my 2 books this book, which is called Economic Science Under Question. So I analyze history of economics, and I came to the conclusion that both in the West and in the Soviet Union, discipline of economics played a very negative role. And I found in the history of economics persons, researchers, scholars who proposed an alternative, fruitful alternative. One of them, maybe one of the most important persons, was John Commons, one of the founders of American institutionalism. This book was published in Moscow in 2016. Another book, which I already investigated, Monetary Problems, was published in Moscow 2021 or 22, and which is called Money, Social Orders, and Economic Science. My book in French, I don't have it here to show you, but I advanced even more. And the most important title is Monetary Social Order. Maybe I answer your question.
Yes, yes, you did. You answered it very thoroughly. And wait, does someone else have a question about history, the video? And if you have a question, please raise your hand or just show a reaction. And
I would like to ask everybody
okay,
whether this talk registered in the video quite easy to understand, even understandable, or you found something which is not understandable. You cannot understand. It's very difficult to understand, or it's impossible for you. This is the first question. The second question, if you understand it, whether it's convincing, whether arguments, facts, I proposed in this video is convincing. You found it that because what I'm saying in this video, it's not commonly accepted, not at all. Mainstream discourse, it's totally different. So what do you think about it? Whether my alternative is a good one, or you have found it's not good, and what in particular you don't like.
Okay, what I'm going to propose is we have one question already, and then I'm just going to summarize. You asked if we understood the video and what was being said, and two, you asked if it was convincing, and three, how does that relate to mainstream, to our thinking about economics? And then we can talk about our thinking of economics. And so let's go to Jeff right now. And then if people want to answer that question, I can have a go at it too. So good questions and a good instructor here. So, Jeff, did you have a question first?
I sort of do. First of all, to answer your question, Vladimir, the volume of information in your presentation was extensive, and I did have some difficulty sorting out the bottom line, so to speak. But having said that, the books that you mentioned at the very beginning were very pivotal to my understanding of the current issue, which I would like to hear summarized in your point of view. But if I could express my understanding that we live in an inverted value system where the value of money is predominant over the value of life. Now, Felix Martin, in the book that you mentioned, I think he is pointing that same thing out, where he talks about social values and a universal value. What is your take on that? And what we need to do, therefore, is to re-invert that value system where life is valued more than money. Could I have a response? Does that jive with your theories? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. You see, the problem is that in order to advance in the development of our social life, it's necessary to change the institution of money. And the first step, and Zellinger just promoted this idea, it's necessary to stop the creation of money, production of money by private banks, and to move it to some other system. And our institute, American Monetary Institute, continue to advance in this direction. So I have in my hands American Monetary Reform Act of 2024. Of course, it's a draft. At the time of Zelinger, he has a congressman in American Congress who pushed this idea to change the system. As we all know, it was unsuccessful. But this work began several decades earlier by so-called Chicago School, Chicago Group, Chicago Proposal. And one of the activists, very important, was Harvard professor of economics, Irving Fisher. He proposed and gave name to this direction, so-called 100% money. 100% money. And his book, it was called as 100% money. But what is interesting, that he is not very typical professor. So he is not just writing books and teaching students. He was a social and political activist at that time, after the crash of 1929. So he was he sent 100 letters to the President of the United States, Roosevelt. And he received something 25 answers. So it was a very active correspondence between himself and the President of the United States. And he had 7 personal meetings with him. So what he proposed? He proposed just to change the system, to change the legislation, to stop private creation of money. As he wrote it, we don't mind, we don't want to prohibit to the private banks to make loans. They can make loans whether they want. But what we don't want, what we want to prohibit, is the creation of money. So they can the right to loan, but money that they have earned before, and not create new money. But the result of this activity was not very fruitful. President Franklin Roosevelt did not accept his proposal. And what was created, and it is always the practice of today. So what he introduced, it was the guarantee of the state of bank deposit of persons. So if something happened, if some crisis takes place, the state is obliged to compensate the losses of the banks which turned to be bankrupt. And the crisis of 2008, what Ben Bernanke made. Chief of the Federal Reserve at that time. So he was very proud of his activity to stop the crisis. but it was the application of what was agreed at that time by Franklin Roosevelt. So the state spent a lot of money. It means money of taxpayers to stop the crisis. So it is absolutely necessary to make this first step to the improvement of the system, to abolish private creation of money. And the money, because money is nothing else than just tickets, coins, jetons, some figures in the large bookkeeping to obtain resources and even human resources of the because by the way of employment. So they can buy lives of persons in some way, their time. So it's a first step, but it's not enough, because everything depends on whether the central bank in the United States Federal Reserve, which is, even for the time being, private organization. It's not public. It was not nationalized as in other countries, Western countries. So what is necessary to do? It's necessary that the people, let's say, active part of it, public, participate very actively in the management of the central bank, in the interest of the nation, and not in the, now, central bank is nothing else than bank of banks, of private banks. It's necessary to change this system. And more generally, let's say it's necessary to change the direction of human values. But you see, our reality, our social reality is constructed by ourself. Social reality is constructed by people, by rules that they introduce, nothing else. It was not taken from the sky. So, in what way it's necessary to change the system? It was in the direction of development of democracy, democratic practices. Present day representative democracy is a bad system. It's not democracy at all. In my video, I make some details about the history of the development of this system. And as if you listened my talk, so most of the authors to which I make references are Americans. And one of them, historian Beers, which several decades ago written a book which said that from the very beginning, United States was constructed not as a really something ruled by the people. From the very beginning, it was constructed in such a way that rich people is on the command. It's not me, it's Beer, Charles Beer, very, very famous historian, American historian. So if we move in this way, So what you are saying will become reality. And which kind of democracy it's necessary to introduce? This democracy is called deliberative democracy. And in the United States, there is a lot of, quite a many scholars. Among them, James Fishkin, which is not just theoretician of deliberative democracy, but he is involved in the organization of many experiments. And what it is, I suppose I explain in my talk what it is. And I show, I suppose, I gave some references. So in what way the system of tribunals, of system of juridical system, court, yes, is working. So people at random is invited to participate in these tribunals at random. So it's possible to say that the group, in French is jury, I don't know how it's called in English. So the people invited to participate in these processes, it's a model of society because they're invited from all, they're representative of all social groups. They're chosen at random. And they decide whether the person accused is guilty or not. They do not decide what kind of measures is needed to take, how many years the person should pass in the prison. But they decided guilty or no. And so a lot of experiments in the United States, in Belgium, and James Fishkin, he organized his experiments not only in Western countries, but also in China. But in China, they prefer to call it consultation experiments. So they're not ready to apply the decision made by this group in practice. They are ready just to hear it. So it's possible to speak about it very longly, but I suppose that at least partially I answered your question.
Yeah, Jeff's question, going back to it, and I dealt with value of money over value of life, and that was a key thought there. And then you went on to discuss how money is central in the central order, and that in the United States, Bernanke institutes a policy basically, and it exists all during the 20th century, as we know from Irving Fisher, is that there's quantitative easing and there's money putting into the bankers' accounts that they control. And this makes them flush and it gives them solvency again. But it's the people's money. They lost their money and their bets. And now we funded them to keep them going. And that's very wrong. And the good news there is more and more people are understanding that. Zarlenga's message there is getting across, and more economists are coming across that. And I want to present this little book, and I'll have to highlight myself for people to see it a little bit.
I would like to be asked the questions about my talk.
Oh, and then I'll bring that up later. But it's the idea of deliberative. It's a young person talking about deliberative democracy, and she goes along with your idea there. So that's important. Let's go on. Jeff, do you have any follow-up question, or are you okay, or anything about, because you went to life, you covered the
Did
whole
you
picture.
listen my talk?
I did. And
Yes.
as I said, the volume of information, it was very difficult for me as an armchair layperson who's been looking at money for decades. It was difficult for me to distill out of that volume of information uh, what a solution is. Now, everything you've said today addresses that solution, but it still doesn't answer the question of how do we get that solution in place. And I believe that as long as it stays in academia, it's never going to happen. That we have to get the people, as you mentioned, we have to get the people involved. And what will involve people if they understand that their life is more invaluable than money? And I think that that is the lever that can get us there, to bring the people's awareness into the need for the changes that you and Zerlenga have proposed and suggested, which is I definitely agree with. Thank you, Professor Vladimir.
Jeff, thank you
Of, co-
very much. And
of
that,
course, to change the beliefs, it's very important. But it's necessary to change rules also. And in Switzerland, 2018, what Zelenga and what American Monetary Institute propose now. So they try to put it into practice. As you know, in Switzerland, democracy is very special. They organize a lot of referendums, voting, popular voting. And in 2018, they asked population of Switzerland whether you want to continue this practice of creation of money by private banks, or it's necessary to forbid this activity and to move the practice of creation of money to the central bank. It was a question. All those who have right to vote could answer yes or no. Unfortunately, 73% of voters said no. So they did not accept the proposal that Zelenga proposed and Aaron Fisher proposed several decades before. They rejected it. Why? Why they did it? You know, recently I was in Geneva. I spoke to people and I remind them the practice of this referendum. And they don't remember it, that this referendum took place. What it means? It means that in their life, this question is not very important. They participated because this is a compulsory. They participated in this voting, but they said no without understanding the result of their voting.
the good news there, the good news there is in the international movement for monetary reform, IMMR, there's a gentleman who's from Bulgaria, Kirill, who is retired. Well, was a Swiss banker, or was in the banking industry, and he and others in IMMR are researching demographically what people are thinking and believing, and they're looking for the next leverage points. And Jeff brought up the leverage point of life over money. Maybe those young people can bring that up, life or money. Are we going to be organized around life, or are we going to be organized around money? But they're searching, and they're getting somewhere, and they're getting good information, and they're looking at what is the fulcrum? What can we use? The fulcrum is what you put your lever over. Where is the fulcrum? What are the issues that we can transform European thinking? And as Vladimir said, we got 73%. That means we only have to double our education and we win. So they want to be hopeful, and I'll work with their hope for right now, but it's to keep pushing. So very, very wonderful stories and points from both of you. Did you have any further thoughts, Jeff or Vladimir, on this?
So you see, and understanding of the functioning of money, it's a political question. And university teachers, university professors in economics, during decades, they made everything to hide the truth, that the creation of money is the affair of private banks. And I don't know how many persons are aware of this practice. The first version of my talk, I naturally made in Russian. And I made this talk among quite young Russian persons. And the reaction was very interesting. They said, "Oh, your theory of money is wrong. Nobody accepts it. But it's not my theory. This theory existed from MacLeod. MacLeod, it's the middle of 19th century. Karl Marx, unfortunately, did not understand MacLeod at that time. And for him, money is gold. And it has very consequences for humanity, for mankind, for Russia, because what is necessary to do, it's not just to transfer property from private property to public property, to state property. What was happened in the USSR with all these negative consequences. What is necessary to do to create large-scale payment community? Large-scale payment community. This payment community in the West exists. In the Soviet Union, it was abolished. It was substituted by the state. And it's a tragic mistake. So what is necessary, first of all, that people understand how money functions. It's necessary to notice that even central banks now, for example, Central Bank of France or Bank of England, on their sites, they explain reality of the functioning of money. But in manuals, in textbooks, it's always, very wrong theories are explained. And you see, the reaction, they said, your theory, but it's not my theory. Oh, so without this understanding, it's very difficult to move ahead.
Thank you, Vladimir. Jeff, any thoughts there?
First of all, let me reinforce my appreciation for Vladimir's presentation. It has opened my eyes mainly through the introduction of other reading materials. I think that the issue is how to get the people involved. And I do believe that people basically understand to a person that life is more important than money. And I think that that could very well be the lever that could make it an issue for people to start there and then get them into. People are not going to sit down to the degree that you have, or even I have, to investigate the reasons what needs to be changed. But they do understand that their life is more important than money. And I do believe that that's a lever to reach, excuse me, the common person. Thank you. Again, thank you very much, Vladimir.
Let's go to, let's see if we can go to Ukraine, because obviously I'm going to see if I can unmute. No, stop. Oh, sorry. Let's ask Vladimir, and let's use that life versus money and Ukraine. How are we able to better choose life in Ukraine? Is that the Ukrainians deciding, Russians deciding, or is it common people telling their leaders in all three areas, the Western countries, Ukraine, and Russia, saying, we want life, we don't want death and money, basically, or a corrupt system, or we want to be able to deliberate about how we go into the future. It seems to me that's what the Ukrainians were trying to do. They went about their own system of voting and deliberating, and it seems like as close as Ukraine's were historically, Kiev was the center hundreds of years ago, and Muscovy became the center, and where the czars ruled from, or St. Petersburg for a few, and so. But how do we settle things for Ukraine? Does anybody have any questions or thoughts for Vladimir, or we could just ask Vladimir that now? Or Vladimir, we could go back to the video itself. Is this about comments about the video? Do people have thoughts or comments about the video? Were you convinced? Does anybody? I'm not very good at polls, so if anyone could raise their hand, and I'll try not to over spotlight them or anything, but if someone can say quickly thoughts about the video too. Anybody? See, I'm going to go back to removing spotlights then, because I wanted to be all of us too. It's just, this is our group today. And is there anyone wanting to speak about, does anyone have a question circling in their mind, wondering about something, about understanding things, or maybe a question? Vladimir, how about you answer things very thoroughly, so you help carry the conversation forward. What about Ukraine? Can we ask you, how do we create life in Ukraine going forward? Any thoughts? Do we need to solve the money problem first? Is that the idea then? Or what can we do? And how can Ukraine become that fulcrum, or that point where we can use the lever to make the rest of the world better, to take that suffering that's happened in Ukraine, and we can use it to create a better world? Any thoughts there?
you waiting my answer?
Yeah, if
Okay.
possible.
Okay. So what is going on now, first of all? So the president present day American president, what he is doing? He tried to stop this war. And he's saying that it's necessary to stop killing, to save lives, human lives. But I think he has in mind different thoughts. The objective of this war and what it is, what kind of war it is. It's a proxy war. And now I spoke that this is a proxy war during 3 years. But now it was officially confirmed by the government of the United States. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, I can find it to show you. So I want to show it. But what he said, this is the quotation of him. And frankly, it is a proxy war between nuclear powers, the United States helping Ukraine and Russia. It needs to come to an end. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, March 5, 2025. Have you seen it?
You know what, I haven't seen that. I wish that's an important admission, and it's one of what I'm going to do is we had one gentleman who responded, and he was upset, saying that Ukraine was invaded and we need to go protect Ukraine. What is happening now is crazy. So
But it was organized practically by the United States. And now, simply, Marco Rubio confirmed that's really, it's true, it's our war, but the initial objectives of this war was to make the Russia of Putin not strong enough to, and this was the objective, but the result was opposite. Now the influence of Putin in the world not diminished, but increased. And now somebody is considered him as a leader of the global South. A lot of Africans support them, including in voting in the United States Nations. So the objective was not accomplished, was not, and it's very costly as a war for the United States. Now, for this reason, not for reason of human lives, but for reason of money, which was spent. President Trump mentioned this reason a lot of times in negotiations, for example, with the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. So it's necessary to stop it because it does not provide expected results for the government of the United States, and at the same time, it costs a lot of money. So it's necessary to stop it. Not for Ukrainian people, but for the interest of the United States, it's necessary to stop it. And the profound, deep cause of this war, as I tried to show it in my talk, is this social order. What is necessary to do? It's necessary to change social orders in all three countries, in the United States, in Russia, and in Ukraine. Only in this case, humanity will be sure that new financial crisis will not come and new war will not be organized. So it's necessary to work in this direction. And as I told, the first step in this direction is realization of what was proposed by American Monetary Institute.
Thank you, Vladimir. Young Suk Kim has a question. Young, if you could go ahead.
Thank you. It was so impressive. I 100% agree what you Vladimir just told. Regarding the previous video, because of my language, I'm not sure I understood the 100%. But the discussion this morning, what you spoke to us this morning, I think I mostly understood. You are 5 years senior to me regarding age. But your ideas, alternatives, were not accepted by the academy or the government. Even the urban officials, you just mentioned that he wrote 100 letters and received 13 letters from President Franklin Roosevelt. And they met 7 times, but he failed to persuade him to accept his idea. That's the destiny of the geniuses. Your idea is so advanced, and also my idea is so advanced. But our idea is always advancing. I think my own idea is a lot of advancement between last even 3 years. After I joined the conversation with the AMI, I think we are divided and conquered. We as a people, we are divided and conquered. By whom? I'm not sure, but that's true, I believe. And if I understood correctly, you mentioned just the payment community. I think it's a community, payment community is a kind of network, like internet. We are all connected through internet. We are living in a totally different society from just 40 years ago compared to. But most of the economic theories or monetary theories are based on the development of society decades ago. That theories are no more applied. The banking system in the United States is based on the 100 years history, before the internet, the delivery of money takes a week from the east of United States to the western United States by the carrying on the coach or horses. These days, it's instant. Money can be moving instantly, and we are all, it's all open. If decided, we can see and observe. I think that's kind of the change of the technology and the society or people's life is already changed. Think about it, if the internet is 100% extinguished from our life after this moment, what will happen? We are disconnected. We are connected through the internet all over the world, but the connection is divided and conquered. It's controlled by some forces, some institutions. So I was also very sorry about the Swiss referendum in 2018. But otherwise, 25% was for the change. It was huge, because my idea or your idea was totally neglected from the mainstream. But Swiss people, 25% is accepting it. It's a big movement. I think you just mentioned that when you met people in Geneva, they've already forgot what happened in 2018. But it's already 7 years ago. We need to do again in Switzerland. If you can get over 50% of acceptance. The most important thing is that we need to overcome the divide and conquer.
I wrote that down, Young Kim, divide and conquer. And and when you said we as a people, the other word for that is we as a humanity, we as all the people on the earth. All the people on the earth have been divided and conquered. And in some way, we need to
you
come
can see
back
at
together.
the Ukraine, yeah, that's the typical observing point. The world is divided and conquered.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to overcome that. I read an article by one of my friend. He wrote that the Tolstoy sent letters to Mahatma Gandhi. Their communication continued and led to the development of the country India, India's independence. Anyhow, we need to overcome the ideology or the Western and Eastern. We need to overcome the divided and conquered mindset.
What we need really, we have to overcome our fear.
Correct. Yeah. 100%.
You see, this story about Irving Fisher and Roosevelt, why he rejected the proposal of Irving Fisher? Why? I studied, I wrote books to understand it. And I read the book and the biography of Irving Fisher. This is biography. And what I have found here, it's interesting what I have found. I have found the reference to the letter of Irving Fisher to his son. He sent this letter in 1935 after rich experience of communication with the president. What he wrote to his son? He wrote, "The president is afraid of the bankers." That's the cause, the reason why he rejected his proposal. In the United States, it's not just once that the president was killed. It's not only John Kennedy was killed. Some other presidents were killed again. It's just possible that he was afraid to be killed. It's possible. Or to organize some campaign in media against him. And I compared it with my new French version of my talk. I compared the president of the United States of 30s with the president of Ukraine nowadays, Vladimir Zelensky. One of the advisors of this person who collaborated with him more than 2 years. He was his advisor, close advisor. Now he lives in the United States. It's Mr. Arestovich, Alexei Arestovich. So now he in the United States, but at that time he was advisor. And recently, he is very active on YouTube, very active. Every day, several talks you can find. And he said, Zelensky is afraid of radicals. Zelensky is afraid of radicals. But who are these radicals? These radicals are neo-Nazi. And I can show you also several, if Stephen will allow me. I can.
Yes, I will. You're now co-host, and you can share whatever.
Yes.
While you're doing that, I want to just mention, because we have other speakers too, that rather than end in 2 minutes, people can go off the line when they want, but we're going to go on for 30 more minutes at least, just to carry this on. So
I would like to show you. You see on the screen what I show you?
There's a green button in the lower middle. It says share.
I see. I will do it.
And then you have to hit one more button.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Now I'm going to remove us so we can.
Yes, this one. This one I want to show you. Now you see on your screen?
No, not yet.
Not yet. So I repeat again. Now you see?
No.
No.
Oh, now we are.
You see?
Yeah, we see a
okay.
point.
So to the left you see President Roosevelt.
Yes.
To the right you see President Zelensky.
Yes.
And now to the left you see President Zelensky. And downstairs you see large scale demonstration in Kiev against the trial to negotiate with Russia concerning the end of hostilities. Just at the beginning of the presidency of Zelensky, it was 2019. To the right here, this is the leader of Ukrainian neo-Nazi. I think I reproduce some quotations from his writings. It's really white supremacist, pure neo-Nazi. And to the right, the photo you see, President Zelensky is listening this neo-Nazi. He showing something on the map, and so he is received by the president. So what former advisor of Zelensky said, that the president is afraid of radicals. It was so he was afraid of Nazi. I can show you something else also. So this is in French, but this is demonstration with a slogan. No to the capitulation. So any negotiation they consider as capitulation. And Zelensky is traitor. At that time, he was already president. And this demonstration, Zelensky is traitor. Now, I would, yes. So this is a book I advise to read to everybody. This is the book written by a Canadian scholar of Ukrainian origin, Maidan Massacre in Ukraine, Mass Killing That Changed the World. And to the right, you know, Zelensky promised to stop hostilities. In 2019, he promised in his electoral program. And so he wanted to realize, to fulfill these promises. He went to the border, and he tried to make order to withdraw, because it was supposed, it was fixed in so-called Minsk agreements, to divide the hostile forces, to stop the shooting, killing. And what happened? They didn't want to listen to him. They said, we invite you to discuss with us in the framework of the movement, no to the capitulation. It means no negotiations, just war, just fight. And there's a lot of videos with this son, not only picture. And he's saying, you know, I'm the president of Ukraine. I'm not just a fool. And I said to you, remove your arms. And they replied, oh, we don't have arms at all. But they had. And hostilities continued in spite of the order of the president, demonstrations against, and all these years from 2014 up to the beginning of the war, 22, they continue to use arms to destroy in the direction of Donbass, including the capital of Donbass, Donetsk. You know, I'm very active on social networks, Facebook and the Russian network Kontakte. And I try to show facts, and my position is, not just on one side. And I received a lot of accusations from Russians. And they sent me a lot of pictures with children killed by these activities of Ukrainian Nazis that continue to kill, continue to shoot. And the explanation is the same, that with Roosevelt. Roosevelt is afraid of the central persons of the social order of the United States, bankers. Zelensky is afraid of central persons of the social order of present-day Ukraine, Nazi.
Thank you. You want to stop sharing for a moment and let's get to some
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
The first, there should be,
Okay.
okay. I would just want to mention too, in terms of greed, young Kim brought this up too, is that Marco Rubio says the war is of proxies, and Trump says we've spent a lot of money on this war and we just want to stop spending that money. Trump's gone further and said too that he wants to be compensated. He wants mineral rights of Ukraine. Can you comment on that, Vladimir, for us? And then I'm going to turn it over to Warren and Peshvok and Earl and Elizabeth.
What I can say, that money is more important to Trump than human lives. Also, what is important for him, his prestige also.
Mm-hmm. You know what? That was good enough. We got it. We understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Warren, please give us some words.
Hi, Steve. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. I'm on my handheld here, but my computer's not working. I have a lot on my mind. I hope I can get it out quick and concise and not confuse people. But as far as we'll start with just the proxy idea that Ukraine. I agree. That's probably true that we put Ukraine up to it. The United States. The United States has this empire, so the military-industrial complex. But one of the things what Trump is saying now, what he wants to save the money, he wants to save the taxpayers' money. Now, this is a buzzword, the taxpayers' money, because we're ingrained with the idea that government spends our taxes and that our taxes are being wasted, okay? But it isn't about the money. Money is not a commodity. It is not private property of individuals or banks. Money is defined by law, by the people who make the government a sovereign government, that we, the people of the United States, do have the authority, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, to create the nation's money, to coin the money. And that means it's a verb, it's not a noun. Money is not a coin, it's a token, it's a credit unit. And the people's credit is the people's credit. And we have been ingrained for so long that it's the taxpayers' money. We got to save the taxpayers' money. Oh my God, we never have enough money. It's always austerity. And we got to have a trade-off between war and peace, between the Pentagon and the General Hospital or something. And we, the people, are being starved because of the military industrial complex of the country and the monetary misuse of our money and our power in the world. And we're wasting the people's money and we're hurting the people. And we have to help to understand the general population, the proletariat, if you will. You said Marx was wrong about money. Marx thought money was gold. Still, people think that gold money has to be a commodity and that has to be private property. As long as if we think that money is private property, we'll always be complaining about what the government's doing with my money. We'll have to dispose people of that idea. It is not property. It is not a commodity. I would refer you to the concept of chartalism, which means the state creation of money. It's what the government says it is. Well, government gives you a token, whether it's a greenback or whatever kind of colored money you want to have, and that's credit for doing something for the government, for the people. And then I can take that money and I can pay my taxes with it. I can pay my mortgage with it. I can pay my rent with it. But it's the people's money. It's not the taxpayers' money. I want to get that through. That the whole idea is just keeping this whole thing going, and why the populace get bought into this stuff, which should be the proletariat, that the right-wing populace, and they should be the proletariat. And we don't have a left-wing party in America. The Democratic Party, the centrist party, it has nothing to do with the people. And that's why they lost the election and why so many working class people actually voted for Trump, because they still believe that he's saving them money. It's horrible that we're so terribly brainwashed and confused in this country, and we don't understand our own history, let alone the history of Ukraine or Russia or anybody else. I hope I made myself clear. I'll let you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Vladimir, that's a pretty sad situation we have here. Do you have any, do you agree with Warren, or what, any thoughts you have, or should we get
So
on?
partially, but
question?
it's not the time and the place to make this discussion here. Let's continue with questions.
Okay, Peshwak, if you could come on, if you're ready there.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Peshwak. If you
Okay.
show yourself, I'll spotlight you if you want to go on video. Peshwak, you've muted yourself. You can
Okay.
ask questions from there, or you can also go on video. It's up to you.
Oh, okay. So can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, please give a question.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Vladimir. It was a great presentation. I appreciate your time and all of your information. I just came across some videos on the internet by Alex Krainer. I think he's a specialist in geopolitics. I think those radicals that the gentleman was referring, it was actually the European central bankers, and it was those who actually in the first place pushed Zelensky into this war. Because we do have a report, a very solid report. You can check on a YouTube, Alex Krainer with K. 4 days before the Mr. Trump inauguration, the Prime Minister of the British UK went to the Ukraine and signed a 100 years deal over the rare material in Ukraine in exchange of support of the Europeans, including UK and France, for continuing of the war. So you get the point that why the Trump was asking to stop the war, because the US is providing material and resources, and He's just paying the bill. So I think those radicals are actually as if that incident with Irving Fisher and the Roosevelt is right, historically, it goes back to the central banks. The European central banks for the last 15 years has been printing money so much that they needed a collateral. So they prepared this war in order to, at the end of the war, to have that collateral for their printed money already, the euro who have been printed for so much, in order to stop the collapse of the Europe. So here we have two situations. Either the American pull out from the whole situation, stop the whole spending, and enforce the both sides to have a ceasefire or some peace, or the European, they need to continue the war in order to reach that agreement. And they don't care, because in a worst case, the Ukraine will end up splitting in two. One goes to the Russian, and the left will go to as a collateral to Europeans. So this is the radical and the central banks who actually they are flare up this conflict, and this is what we are facing. And all of those buzz and things, it now is revealing that's the situation. Thank you.
Let me Vladimir, you may be ready to answer, but for everyone else, let me state Peshwak's question a little bit again, and that is when Peshwak mentions collateral, and it's the central bankers in Europe, they actually want to be the bankers of Ukraine, and they can keep their growth and their banking system going by collateralizing the wealth. When you collateralize the wealth, you can then create money to offset it. And so that's how the ECB can create money, because they can create it off the collateral, the wealth of Ukraine. If I got that right from your Peshwak, but that's the concern. Do you have any thoughts about this, Vladimir?
I can speak only about things that I know. And I practically know nothing about the functioning of the European Central Bank. So I cannot say something about it. But Americans begin to conquer resources of Ukraine. And one of the very precious Ukrainian resource is the soil. Ukrainian soil is the most productive soil in the world, so-called black soil, Chernozem. And as I know, I did not verify this information, that already 400,000 of hectares of this Ukrainian soil is sold to American agro companies. So American companies, I think it's cargo, take advantage already of the resources of Ukraine.
Thank you, Vladimir. That's a very interesting point. And there's a farmers group in the United States that concerns itself about farming in the United States, but also around the world. And this will be a part of their conversation, and your agricultural background will be interesting to them too. So that may be another meeting for you, but if it can take place. Let's go to Earl. Earl has a question. If Earl's there, he's had his hand up for a while, so. What I can say is we have 10 minutes left, and we've already gone 20 minutes over the period, and I'd like to finish, we'll begin to wind things up. So if people have a last thought or quick idea, we will open that up. But first, let's hear from Earl. Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning, Stephen and Vladimir and everyone. I really appreciate Vladimir's presentation. I tried to watch the video. I was tied up with other things and saw a fair amount of it several days ago and really appreciate that. I was thinking it might have emphasized some thoughts I've had about Ukraine and the relationship of the Russian invasion to what's going on there. My view of this is that the deliberate provocation of war is what actually happened, that the U.S. Deliberately provoked Russia to attack Ukraine. Back in 2014, Russia was offering Yanukovych lower interest loans that Ukraine desperately needed. And the U.S., particularly through the CIA and Victoria Nuland, who was then in the State Department, wanted to make sure that didn't happen. They didn't want Russia to have closer economic ties with Ukraine. And so they engineered a coup that overthrew Yanukovych and put in a puppet of a Nazi variety, as Dr. Yefimov has pointed out. The U.S. policy continued to want to have NATO expand onto Russia's border, which top U.S. statesmen like George Kennan, Paul Nitze, who for many years led the mutual arms negotiations for arms reductions between Russia and the United States, all insisted that NATO not expand eastward. You're simply going to provoke Russia, and instead of having the end of the Cold War and an era of cooperation, you're going to have renewed conflict. Well, it's the major banks in the U.S. that especially did not want Russia to beat the U.S. and the Wall Street and even, the UK and ECB to be making loans to Ukraine. And so how to do that? Well, let's expand NATO onto Russia's border. Let's attack the Russian districts of the Ukraine. And they were actually killing many people. I assume Dr. Yefimov may have mentioned that. And there were agreements, oral and eventually a written agreement at Minsk, that the U.S. Would settle with Russia and not make Ukraine into a NATO country. What was the reason Russia was able to offer lower interest rates? Russia has publicly owned banks. So does China, very largest banks in the world. And they create money out of nothing when they make loans. The entire loan is new money, which means, and this is basically referred to, Irving Fisher and others knew this, that the government can either create new money by paying money directly to purchase new goods and services, which was done with greenbacks during the Civil War through Abraham Lincoln. And it can also be done through either nationally owned banks or banks at the state or local level. And Russia has used the advantage of public banks to create a significant portion of its money. Now, that's mostly not made public, so we don't know exactly how much or exactly how they do it. And China has done that even more successfully, and that explains the enormous growth and expansion of China over the last 3 or 4 decades. Double interest growth rates, and they they channel this money that they create through their banks at the very local level where they fund small businesses. And this creates many jobs. And
Earl, that
it's,
you're
yeah,
absolutely right about China's banking and Russia's central banking system. All right. Well, I can confirm the Chinese central banking. I'm going to guess Russia. And during the Soviet Union had just a one-tier banking system rather than the two-tier or three-tier, if you can include non-bank money. But if you could just get to a question for Vladimir, because we have very little time left.
okay. Yeah, I apologize for going on, but it is a complex situation and it's run over decades. But the bottom line is that the private banks create 95% of the money in the United States. No one ever deliberately gave them this power. The public does not know this. Public does not know that banks create new money when they make loans. And Wall Street has the goal of maximizing their own profit. How do they do this? The number one profit maker for big banks is wars. The loans are guaranteed. They're guaranteed by the government. The government often promises to pay the debts of the loser. And often the banks fund both sides of the same war. So war is number one. Fossil fuels is another. In spite of the collateral damage, the enormous environmental and health damage, and they're not responsible for that damage. Private prisons is another. Big pharma is another, which is, medicine for profit, basically, which is not good for health. The United States has the worst health of any modern industrialized country. We cannot compete with countries like Russia, China, Iran, India, that have publicly owned banks that create money out of nothing and use it for productive loans. Wall Street would rather use it to keep these other countries in debt, which they've done for decades. And I think part of the solution is not just the NEED Act, which I think is, a brilliant idea, but also to have banks that are much more flexible. Because if they are lending at the very local level, and the Bank of North Dakota.
Earl,
Okay.
we don't disagree with you. Let me ask Vladimir, do you have a comment on any thoughts you have about what Earl's presenting?
First of all, I would like to thank you personally, Stephen, and all participants to take time to listen my talk and to listen my answers today. And I think that maybe in the future we will continue to communicate and to share our ideas about the questions of money and the monetary reform.
Thank you. I will give Earl a thought or two.
Okay.
Saying, Earl, when we go into the future, we're strategically planning now. And the AMI has been totally focused on monetary reform in a very narrow sense. We're monetary specialists. I was going to bring up a book on some young people. Now in England, they're reviewing monetary policy and how we get into deliberative, and they call it iterative government, where we keep reviewing corporations' charters, and we demand that Congress flex its muscle and changing things differently. Now, what Earl's presented about bankers in war, bankers in fossil fuels, bankers in big pharma, bankers, etc., and this need for push for growth and for them to expand, or their system doesn't work. we want to take that into account, and we're learning how we can expand that message, because monetary reform, as Vladimir said, and some people said, regard to the Swiss initiative, only took us so far. It gave us 25%. It's connecting issues like that Earl has brought up, and with the banking system, how we might go into the future. And we're thinking about how to do that right now, and what are those leverage points that we can expand. Thank you, Earl. And thank you, everybody. We've gone 2 hours now.
Can I make two last brief comments, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay.
How about we make it 1.5? Because I might have to
Okay.
interrupt.
One and a half. Basically, the United States big banks, which run our country, cannot compete with the public banking interest rates that Russia and China offer, and the other BRICS offer the third world. War is our only answer, which is a very lame and destructive and self-destructive answer. I want to say I read Stephen Zarlenga's book twice. I think it's a marvelous book, priceless research, but he didn't hit the money creation issue. And I recommend that people read the economist Richard Werner, Werner, a German-British economist, who has written some articles that prove conclusively both the accounting and an actual bank loan, that banks create new money in the entire amount of a loan when they make a loan. This is a huge breakthrough in economics, and I strongly urge people to read that.
Okay. Yeah, Werner has presented here, and we've had ongoing conversations and invitations for him to continue speaking, but we haven't had luck getting responses right now. But you know what, Elizabeth, I see your hand. Give us a good last word.
Okay, I have a very quick question. There are many reasons for the proxy war. We could talk for hours, but I have one question. Who finances the neo-Nazis and what they are planning to gain from it?
It's a very good question. So at the beginning, it's interesting. And an Ukrainian scholar has made a special investigation and published it in Russian just after the events in Maidan Square. His name is Minakov. And he investigated who financed and supported the birth of these neo-Nazi military detachments, military young persons. And he discovered that it was at the beginning Ukrainian oligarch who financed these groups. Why they did it? Because after the disappearance in some way of the Ukrainian states after this coup d'etat against Yanukovych, so they needed some military forces to defend themselves, to defend their property, and also they saw how efficient these young men are to attack and to influence the power structures. And they wanted to occupy in these power structures central roles, central positions. So at the beginning, it was this oligarch, this financed these groups. But, this oligarch, they determined the functioning of the state Some of them began to play central roles in this, in the government, in power structures, and some of them just finance politicians who play in their interests. That's how it continues to action. For example, the most powerful, most influential neo-Nazi unit is Azov, famous Azov. And at the beginning, it was promoted by the oligarch Arsen Avakov, who is oligarch at the same time he was governor of Kharkiv region. So he began immediately after the coup d'etat Minister of Internal Affairs, and he transformed Azov unit in an official unit of official Ukrainian army. And the same happened with other Nazi units. So it's the state who began to finance the functioning of these units.
Elizabeth, do you have any follow-up or thought there?
Well, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, in some ways, the cutting off their nose to spare their face in some way, don't they? I mean, they continue that war. Do they gain anything from it?
Now, these Nazi units, they're against any negotiations. They are against to stop the war because the war is their life. So when they are influential, they continue to influence the continuation of the war.
But the financiers who won't finance them, do they gain anything from it? I mean, the country is being destroyed.
You see, it's this kind of functioning is very complex because everything is changing. For example, present-day Ukrainian president Vladimir Zelensky. He became president because of the financial support of oligarch Igor Kolomoisky. Now he is in prison. So instead of thank this oligarch, he put it in the prison because Zelensky is acting according to the situation. The situation was favorable to put Zelensky, to put Kolomoisky in prison, and he did it. So, and a lot of observers, and I follow very carefully Ukrainian observers. It's not just President Trump who called Zelensky dictator. A lot of Ukrainian observers think that the same way. So the actual regime in Ukraine is a dictatorship. And it's a dictatorship of the mixture. It's an oligarch, it's the army, its juridical system, and for these several years of presidential activity, Zelensky succeeded to subordinate all these forces to his power.
Thank you. I guess it is a time of war, and those things happen under emergencies. We'll see what happens in the United States now too, given emergency powers. Elizabeth, you have one last word to say goodbye on.
Well, I'm just as confused as before. It doesn't seem to make any sense at all. I mean, they just destroying themselves. And
Seems like if we take humanity and all of the people of the world, maybe we need women leaders because the boys in the play box are too war-oriented with their.
You see, in order to understand the actions of Russian oligarchs and Ukrainian oligarchs, it's necessary to take attention how they consider their own life and the life of their children. So Russia and Ukraine, for them, it's not something where we will eager to live. They just make money in these countries, but they consider lives of their children abroad. Russian oligarchs have their families in UK, most of them. I suppose Ukrainians also. That's why the destruction of the country does not have any influence for them, because they will live abroad.
a lot of the oligarchs are in Vienna, though. A lot of the Ukrainian oligarchs making a nuisance of themselves.
Yeah. Well, let's pause and give things a break there. We've gone through quite a bit of information. We understand more of the players involved, and we understand the ideas of money and collateral, and the idea of expanding from a Western banking system about collateral in Ukraine. And where we started from, though, is the idea of peace and of life versus war, of life versus money. And we might be able to refine that now and say life versus private created money versus publicly created money, and we have to have deliberative democracy, to use Vladimir's word, deliberative democracy. So let's give things a break. We've gone 40 minutes after, and that was in a good conversation on thinking about things that's expected, and that's fine. And any last thoughts, Vladimir, or anyone? We can end the session for today.
Again, thank you very much to all of them.
And I thank
all of you.
All of them too. So we can give if you're around, we can give a wave. So
thank you very much.
Thank you. And you all have a great day, the rest of your day, and take care. Bye-bye, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you all.